What's going on, party people? Robert Jenkins here. I want to welcome you to another episode of the North Star Podcast. To my left here, I have my illustrious co-host, Jeff Gerlach. Jeff, say what's up to the people, man.
Howdy, y'all.
So today, this episode, what we're going to talk about is the philosophy of firearms. And the reason we want to touch on that is because the North Star Podcast is a show all about freedom. In case you didn't catch the reference there, the whole North Star, the whole reference to the North Star is a reference to enslaved Africans during slavery days in this country used to follow the North Star to freedom. So that's kind of like what my symbolism, my interpretation of the North Star is. That's why I have it as the name of the show. And if you start really breaking down how do you gain and maintain and extend freedom, I think you find that, personally, I would say that firearms are an integral part to being a free human being. And I think that's why it's the Second Amendment is the Second Amendment. And the Founding Fathers knew full well that if you don't have the right to keep and bear arms, then you can say that you're free, but as soon as somebody comes along and is willing to use force against you, you are not free. So that's what we're talking about today, the philosophy of firearms. We're not talking about caliber and, all that kind of stuff. What gun is the best situation to bug out with and all that kind of stuff. We're just talking about why should you own firearms? What's your personal reason for owning firearms?
So obviously the biggest, for me, there's two biggest reasons.
Mm-hmm.
The first reason is that my God-given right, my inalienable right to protect my life and my family's life.
Mm-hmm.
My life comes first, because if I can't protect mine, I can't protect my family, I can't protect the people I care about. And the reason I say inalienable is because that's not, it's like my shirt says, my rights are derived from God.
Yeah.
And we are born with those rights. Those are natural rights. The right to protect an individual's life is not something we're given by a state, by a government, by a law. It is that's why they call it a natural law. It's a natural law that if somebody tries to harm you, to hurt you, you have the right to protect yourself. And you can't argue with that. I mean, It's pretty crystal clear. Could anybody argue that at any time you do not have the right to protect yourself?
How would you approach that argument? How would you say you don't have the right to stop somebody from hurting you?
Exactly. There is no argument.
Right. So
a gun, in my opinion, and actually I'm going to say there is no opinion to this either, it's a force multiplier.
Mm-hmm.
Let's face it, if some guy is trained in 7 different forms of fighting and he's 3 times faster than me, 3 times stronger than me, and he comes to harm me, I need to have a means and ways in which to protect my life.
Mm-hmm.
I need a force multiplier.
Mm-hmm.
I also need a force multiplier against tyranny.
Right.
That's my second reason.
Mm-hmm.
And the second reason, interestingly to me, I think this is broken down. My second reason is my first reason as an American.
What do you mean?
So my first reason within my life is to protect my life.
Mm-hmm.
My first reason as an American is to protect my life, my country against tyranny.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It is that when everything else fails, the only way we can maintain our liberty, when everything else fails, is with a gun.
Yep. What's that old saying? You got the 3 main ways of maintaining liberty or freedom is the jury box, the ballot box, and the cartridge box.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
That's what it boils down to.
And our forefathers wrote about how we will suffer a long time to try to work things out, while evil will not. And so when we talk about evil and all that, I'm not talking about some hidden thing that we don't ever see, and it's this mystical thing somewhere in the depths of hell.
Right.
We're talking about the evil to take a man's natural born right, a man, a woman, just to define that, when we say man, we mean everybody.
Yeah, the way it used to be used, mankind.
Yes, mankind is that when any individual tries to take your natural rights from you, which is no different than your life. You have the right to protect your natural rights.
Right.
And there's no argument. I don't care what a law can state, what an attorney can come up with, 30-round magazine, an automatic, a semi-automatic. Look, well, wait, there's an assault rifle.
Yeah, non-existent things, made-up terms.
Gun is a gun is a gun is a gun. And let's face it, they're all made to assault.
Yeah. Yeah. By definition, they're weapons which are made to assault people. And I think I've mentioned once before, I'm holding a scary black pen in my hand. If I write a poem with this, then it ain't no assault weapon. But if I stab you in your eye socket, that's an assault pen. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Whatever you use to assault somebody with is an assault weapon. That's a silly term. And I like my personal reason for owning firearms. It's really it's the same thing as you stated, man. I look at it from the standpoint of I'm a libertarian, and I take it all back to property rights. And the first the first form of property and most important form of property that I own is myself. And as the owner of myself, I have the right to stop other people from assaulting or taking anything from me, including my life. And then, like you said, the life of my family, friends, and loved ones after that. And it's just like on the airplane. When you get ready to fly somewhere, the stewardess, she gets up and she does a little demonstration with the life jacket, and she says, and the oxygen mask, and she said, well, now if we depressurize, the oxygen mask will fall from the ceiling. Put it on yourself first, and then on your kids. And it's just like what you were saying, Jeff. I have to defend myself first to be able to defend my family. So that's what I'm saying. Me, self-defense, and then my family.
And just so I'm just getting some definitions together, so everybody, I don't want anybody thinking I'm ignoring him. I'm listening. I just want to get some definitions together so we can break this down. Well, people have an understanding.
Indeed. So let's go over. Well, I think we've established that the Second Amendment, well, really, the right to self-defense is a natural right. It's given to us by God, but a lot of people take it back to the Second Amendment to the Constitution. I personally don't even talk too much about the Constitution anymore because first of all, it's irrelevant because nobody follows it. And second of all, it's irrelevant because my rights as an individual don't depend on some paper somewhere. My rights as an individual come from the fact that I am an individual created by God, living in this creation. I have sovereignty over myself. I am the boss of me. And I have liberty, which is the ability to dispose of oneself and one's property in any manner that one sees fit, as long as you don't harm anybody else while you're doing that. That's what I think liberty is.
I agree.
So
I agree. Yeah, and you know what? People can say, well, you need laws, you need rules, well, okay, I don't disagree with that. Meaning, I don't think we really need to have a law in place to state you don't kill people.
Right.
Meaning you just walk down the street and kill somebody. But the whole premise is that if what you do does not encroach on anybody else's liberty, anybody else's right to life, anybody's else right to free speech, to speak and think as you wish, there's no problems.
Right.
And I think what happens is that people, sometimes when something's so simple, it's confusing. What? Huh? It can't be that easy. No, it really is that easy. It's that simple.
You're making it hard.
Yeah, you're complicating it. And that's what attorneys have done for years and years and years, is really complicate really simple things so that people think it is majorly complicated.
Right.
Look, you save your life, you protect your life, you're not guilty of anything. Well, there could be scenarios where maybe you are. Maybe you were in the middle of a drug deal, and the drug deal. Okay, so two bad people were doing a bad thing, and the one bad guy tried to hurt the other bad. Well, it doesn't matter. Bad guy, no bad guy. He protected his life.
Yeah.
You can't deem it on because your opinion is they're both bad people.
And let's face it. In that scenario, the only reason they're bad is because there's a law that says you can't sell drugs.
Yeah.
Some drugs is legal as hell.
Yeah.
And they seem to be the most deadly ones. You know what I'm saying?
That's That's another podcast.
That is a whole other podcast.
But you're correct.
Yeah, and the funny thing about it too, most of those laws that we're talking about, I always say laws ain't nothing but opinions with guns. That's all government is. Government is force. That's all government is a small group of people who claim the sole ability, a monopoly on the ability to use force against other people in a given area. That's what government is.
And here's a really good thought process with that. Why would anybody want to take your natural born right to protect your own life in any way, shape, or form?
Well, the only reason I can...
Where's the logic?
Yeah, the only logic I see in that, and what you're asking, another way of putting it is, why would anybody want to disarm you?
Yes.
And the only answer I can ever come up with to that question is they must want to do something to you that they know you're going to object to strenuously, and they don't want you to be able to object to it, so they want you to be disarmed. Because that's all firearms are for. That is the philosophy of firearms. You are only free if you have the ability to resist someone who has evil intentions for you.
We try to sell it off as it's compassion. And we use fear for that. Well, look, there's been a mass shooting, and if we do this, everybody's safer. Well, hold on here. You mean to tell me that because some bad, evil person did a bad, evil act, that I now need to lose my natural right to protect my life because that somehow is going to make everybody safer? Well, first off, this is America, right? That's a matter of opinion. Yeah. That's the great thing about natural rights. There's no opinion. Yeah. It's not based on opinion. It's based on natural fact. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. There's no opinion in that. And why would somebody... You still have to go down that road. Why would somebody... Because they want control. Yep. They want control of the people. Yeah.
I'm at the point in my life where I don't give people who wish to disarm me, I don't give them the benefit of the doubt anymore. You don't get the, you have good intentions, but they just want to save lives. No. They want to enslave me in some way, form, or fashion. And the reason I say that is because if you honestly look at, for example, we'll look at this just now. If you honestly look at the Second Amendment and you read what the founding fathers said about the Second Amendment at the time that they wrote the Second Amendment, there is no other interpretation of the fact other than they wanted us to be armed. Not only self-defense was a given. That wasn't even mentioned. They wanted us to be armed to resist tyranny. And the tyranny that they thought we might have to resist was going to come from our own government. There's no two bones about
and they didn't even think it. They knew it.
They knew it
because they had been through it, and they studied history for thousands of years. That's where all tyranny starts. It's once again we're talking about natural rights as a fact. Well, that is a fact.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
That is a fact.
Can you read read the Second Amendment? For them.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to a free state, the right of the people shall not be infringed.
The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And when you read the founding fathers' writings at the time when they wrote this, they wrote basically a handbook to it. The Federalist Papers, Anti-Federalist Papers, all those. There's tons of writings out there. Tench Cox, one of my homeboys. I say homeboys like I knew the dude. I like his name, but also he had a lot to do with the Second Amendment, the crafting of it, and they all say that one of the main advantages that we have over all the people of Europe is that we are able to be armed to resist tyranny from our government. There is no two ways about it. They wanted us to, and they even say it's the terrible implements of the soldier that are the birthright of the citizens of the United States. So it's not, this is a military grade weapon. Yeah, exactly. That's what they wanted us to have. That's what they specifically wrote the Second Amendment for, so that the average man or woman in this country, back in those days, I know I wasn't included in that back in them days. My wife wasn't included. Your wife wasn't included in that. It was just white men at the time. We get that. But stop letting these people divide and conquer you, because this ain't back in them days. Everybody nowadays is recognized under the law as being a full human being. And if you still thinking in your mind that you ain't no full human being, you still calling the Constitution a racist piece of paper, as so many black people that I know do, that's your poor understanding of the document, and that's also your low level of self-esteem that you're thinking of yourself like that. I'm a full-blooded American man. You know what I'm saying? I don't fall anywhere in the hierarchy. I'm on a par with everybody, and I don't consider myself above anybody, but I'm definitely not below anybody. So I'm not going to be thinking this old victimology, that was racist because they wasn't. But yeah, I know that.
Well, and I'm sure you've seen that movie, The Patriot.
Mm-hmm. Good movie.
The one thing that I love that they portrayed in that movie, and everybody watching, anybody who's going to not move against, going to think differently or try to prove wrong. Mm-hmm. Okay, movies are movies, I get it.
Right.
But one of the things that I love that they portrayed in that movie was, look, do not think for a moment there wasn't a 14-year-old or 13-year-old boy that didn't fire his weapon in the Revolutionary War, or fire his dad's weapon in the Revolutionary War. Mm-hmm. Don't think for a moment that there wasn't a black man that fired his weapon against a redcoat. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things I love that they showed in that movie. Yeah, was that this wasn't just a movement about a race. Right. It was. And we weren't there, but I seriously doubt a woman, whether black, white, a man, whether black, white, if a redcoat came on that property with 30 other men or 5 other men, they were told what their intentions were. Right. Don't think for a moment they didn't defend that land. Right.
There's a on Netflix, is it Amazon? On Amazon right now, I forget. This is like the African American presidents in the Revolutionary War. It's a documentary series, and it's got Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. A lot of people think he's a basketball player, but he's actually a pretty good scholar, pretty decent.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's a pretty decent little scholar and activist. So he's narrating this series, and he talks about people like Peter Salem, who was one of the most feared fighters in the Revolutionary War, taking out British generals and stuff like that. He talks about I always call these people, I always feel like I know them. You read about them and everything, but you had Crispus Attucks, and I always say his name was Crispus Attacks because he attacked me. Anyway, but he was a runaway captive, say runaway slave. These people weren't slaves; they were people, so they were held captive against their will. Right, so I hesitate to say a runaway slave, but just for common parlance sake, he was a runaway slave, described on his wanted poster as being a tall mulatto whose knees were nearer together than is common. So he's a tall, knock-kneed guy.
So who issued that wanted?
That was whoever he ran away from. Okay. His quote master, you know what I'm saying? And so this cat ran away and joined like the Merchant Marine. He was a seaman, and he was in Boston the night of the Boston Massacre. He was the first person shot. His first American killed by the British was a tall, knock-kneed, light-skinned black dude who was a former slave. And so I always look at that guy as a source of inspiration. And I feel like that's what I'm talking about. If he, who had just recently escaped slavery, was willing to fight for something that he probably didn't have or was still struggling to get, how pathetic does it sound nowadays to hear other black people talking about that's I've heard many black people say, oh, that Second Amendment, that's that old white boy stuff. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, really? That's racist. Having guns is racist. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, no, man. The first gun laws in this country came after the Civil War, when white citizens in the South said, wait a minute, they're free now? These black folks are free now? That means they have the what? They have the Second Amendment? Whoa. We got to make some laws about that. That's the first gun control laws in this country. And that's why I find it ironic that nowadays in the biggest cities with the cities with the biggest black populations, like Baltimore, for example, those are the cities where it's hardest to get a gun and where it's illegal to have a gun on you when you're out and about. And they're heavily black and Democrat, by the way. I ain't saying to point that out. That's facts. It's very ironic that the political party that says they love black people so much are the ones that
you and I have talked about that a lot, and really it's been for me wanting to get an understanding, and actually it's also to make sure stuff I've read about that being correct, and You know what I want to do here?
What's that?
I want to point out a couple things. Note that in the Second Amendment, it doesn't say hunting, sport, doesn't say 22 caliber, 50 caliber,
Shotgun,
tank,
no,
grenade,
no,
anything like that. It says a well-regulated militia being necessary to a free state. I want to, you know what? I love when you talk about the Second Amendment because you talk about how really there's two sections in this. It really is two different. Well, they're the same thing, but there's two statements going on here.
Right.
And to help people understand, our forefathers were careful. I mean, these are some educated men. They were careful with the words that they chose. And I've done this. I went back through the Second Amendment and I looked up words like regulated, militia, necessary, state, right, infringed. Those words, and we have dictionaries changing.
Yeah.
We have literal definitions being changed. And we also live in times where words don't mean that's not what that word means. Yeah. And here's the thing. I went back as far as I could go in dictionaries. These words have not changed their meaning in a long time. And they still today mean the same thing that they meant in 1776. Well, I shouldn't say 1776, but after 1776. So tell everybody about the way you break down the Second Amendment involving there's one section and there's another section. Because I love that, man.
I think
it's awesome.
The way I like to look at it, because it says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people shall not be infringed. Now, that's the way they wrote it back then. Like you said, they're educated men. A lot of them are lawyers and stuff like that. To me, the best way to understand it is to put it's two clauses in there. It's a dependent clause and an independent clause. And I personally like to put the second clause first and then read it backwards because it gives you the clearer picture. And so instead of reading it from the beginning, if you start with the second clause, it says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Why? Because a well-regulated militia is necessary for the security of a free state. And then to me, like the most important thing that I want to point out when they say regulated, this is where a lot of people that are anti-gun, they want to jump on that word regulated. Like that means we need to make rules about what you can own. But that's absolutely false. Back in the days when they wrote this, well-regulated meant well-trained. That's all it meant.
I left out a part in here.
Yeah.
I just realized it.
Yeah.
Man, how did I mess that up?
Because you know it so well. You're familiar with it. So familiar with it.
The right of the people to keep. Yep.
But you see what I'm saying, though? So it's not regulated as in let's make rules about what they can have. It's you guys need to train with your stuff. And you need to have some officers appointed above you to lead you in case of the militia has to be activated. And I think one time I looked up militia. And matter of fact, it was in Tench Cox, I think his writing, one of those guys. And they said that what is a militia? Well, that's simple. It is us, the people. All men from age 16 to 64.
Yep. I got to reread this, man. I screwed it up.
Go ahead. I've
actually got it memorized, but I got so nervous that I'm like, I'm going to mess it up, and then I messed it up anyways. A well-regulated militia being necessary to a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Right.
To touch on your militia thing, I just want to read it. A military force that is raised from the civil population to supplement a regular army in an emergency. Raised from the civil population. Now, I love here's what's interesting. If you look this up on the way it was written 150 years ago and the way that what they're throwing in now, this is something that they add into this.
Yeah.
A military force that engages in a rebel or terrorist activities in opposition to a regular army.
Yeah. See, that's you can tell that's a later
that didn't
addition.
exist 150 years ago.
You can tell that's a later addition. Yep. The founding fathers never would have considered, because that would have been saying that they themselves were terrorists. They would have thought that a militia. Keep in mind, the founding fathers did not want for this country to have a standing army, because they specifically say in their writings that the method of oppression for overseas oppression and tyranny always backfires and becomes the means by which you become enslaved and tyrannized at home. So in other words, your military, if you have a standing military, it's always eventually going to be used against you. So that's why they did not want a military to stay, for the United States to have a full-time military. And even to this day, we pay lip service to that concept, because every 2 years, I think it is, Congress has to pass another Defense Authorization Act to pay for the military. Because it says in the Constitution, it says that no military force shall be basically raised or equipped for more than 2 years. So that's why every 2 years you have to pass a military Defense Authorization Act. I think the last one I remember was the John Warner Defense. That's probably a long time ago. But they always sneak a lot of crazy stuff in them bills too, because they know it's going to get passed.
And didn't they, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't they also, there's this idea that the militia is this land.
What do you mean?
What I mean by that is that the militia is here in this land. The militia is not what's used to go over to France.
Right. No, militia
is here to protect this country.
Right. And that's why they didn't want a standing army.
Against foreign and domestic.
Yeah. And that goes back to why they didn't want a standing army. Because the king was using a standing army against them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So I also want to throw in with militia the word regulated.
Oh yeah.
Control or maintain the rate of or speed of a machine as it operates properly. Control or supervise by means of rules and regulation. Mm-hmm. So how do we, by rules and regulation? And I know some people are going to go, you see, they needed rules and regulation. Mm-hmm. No. This is about the militia and the idea that, look, if you just take a whole bunch of, well, we'll say farm owners then, but let's put it in context for today. Yeah. Take a bunch of homeowners, give them rifles. Mm-hmm. They can't protect.
Right.
They don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to operate. Yeah. It'll just be like a
shoot, move,
go, run.
Yeah.
They don't know how to do any of that. So they have to be taught. They have to practice. Mm-hmm. They have to be regulated. Mm-hmm. They have to learn.
Yep.
And, a bunch of civilians just running around with weapons to try to protect lose.
Yep. And that's what they were talking about. Well-regulated. A well-trained militia led by men of high caliber, people of high caliber nowadays. That's what they mean. That's what well-regulated means.
Yep.
And keep in mind, people say, no, that don't mean that means we get to control what weapons you have. Well, back in those days, individuals used to own cannons.
Those were ships with cannons.
Those were individual people.
Yeah, but people, there's a lot of people. Well, you should have the right to have a tank. Well, wait a second.
Well, you can have a battleship. What's that?
Why not? If I can afford a tank, why can't I have a tank?
Yeah, it's a seaborne tank.
Remember, the whole purpose of this is to fight against tyranny. Mm-hmm. Well, if they're going to come at you with a tank,
what do you need? You can't, can't have a Volkswagen in return.
And the U.S. actually used private ships, with cannons on them.
Yep.
And I shouldn't say used. There's so much volunteering. That's really kind of incorrect to go about that. So we've got regulated militia being necessary. I'm going to read the definition of necessary, but really go over this. Necessary, because this is critical. Necessary, required to be done, needed, essential, determined, existing, or happening by natural laws or predestination, inevitable. Now, they said a well-regulated militia being necessary to a free state. So they're saying that in order for a state to be free, to have liberty, it is necessary, not possibly, not sometimes, not only in this time, not in that time, that in order to maintain your liberty, it is 100% necessary. No option there.
And it's natural. What's that part about?
No, yeah. So it says determined, existing, or happening by natural laws.
So a well-regulated militia is determined by natural laws to be
Think about that.
needed
Think
for the
about
security
that.
of a free state.
See, I kind of come at that with a little different angle. That a well-regulated militia is natural. Meaning, in a tribe, it is natural to have a group of people that protect that tribe.
Right.
It is natural. And that group of people, those warriors, they are a different group of people within the tribe. You know what I mean? It's just, listen, some of us are not warriors. It's okay.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
There are warriors in a tribe. And that is natural. That is needed. You know, and I love this. It is predestined. If you think about it, if we just went out and put together a group of 100 people and said we're going to go live on this 50 acres, naturally what would happen? There would be a group of people,
Division of labor,
and they're predestined.
Yeah.
I mean,
some people
warriors are born.
Yeah, some people everybody would do what they're good at. And
Absolutely.
There are some people that are good at, cooking. There's some people that are good at fixing stuff.
Yep.
Some people good at fighting.
Yep.
Some people, know how to defend themselves and will defend and are brave. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
It's just,
and it's natural.
Yeah, it's just a natural thing.
It's the natural order of things. So our forefathers are saying that if we don't have this, if we do not have a regulated militia, and we do not have the right to keep and bear arms, it's over.
Yeah.
You have no liberty. You have no freedom. It's gone. I mean, there's no argument. I mean, there's not a statement in here that says there may only come a time. I think they're guaranteeing us there will be a time. Period. Because history's proven over and over and over again there will be a time. And history's also proven the way that tyranny exists is by de-arming, just what you were talking about.
Yeah.
It's one of the first things that tyrannical leadership does is disarms their people.
Right. I hate to go straight to Hitler, but the reason you have to do that is because it's so instructive to see in recent memory, not really recent memory, but in non-ancient history, relatively modern history, how has disarmament been done, who has done it, and then what has happened after they did it. And when you look at Hitler and the Weimar Republic, they had the right to keep and bear arms, but at some point there were laws made that said Jews were not able to own firearms, and that other undesirables, as they would call them. What was that? Deplorables.
Yep.
Other deplorables wouldn't be able to own guns, and they kept registries of them, and then they used the fact that those guns were registered to actually go take those weapons from those people. In France they did the same thing. In France they kept a registry of weapons, and then oddly enough, when Hitler invaded, that's how he knew where to go. They seized the government buildings, looked at the records, and was like, "Oh, well, look at this. Here's all your gun owners."
That's what scares me about the NRA. It really does. That's what bothers me about the NRA is that it's known. If you become a member, look, if you're not a gun owner, you don't join the NRA.
Yeah, why would you? Yeah.
And that's what really scares me about it is that not only do we have government records, and let's face it, why does a government need records on anybody that owns a gun? Why does the state need a record?
Why do they need a record on anybody that owns a baseball bat?
Right. What justifiable reason? Well, that way, if they commit a crime, what?
If they
the record has nothing to do with that.
If they commit a crime, arrest them for the crime.
Right. There's only one reason a government needs a record of anybody.
To come get you.
It is to move against you.
Yep.
That is it. There's no other reason. There's no other reason.
Right.
If you look at the United States, we have been creating a system of records and everything on people.
Yeah.
Just nonstop.
Yeah.
Nonstop.
Yeah.
Nonstop. A baby's born, boom, it's got to have a social security number. We got to start tracking. We got to know who owns guns.
Yeah.
It's got to go against, The other thing it doesn't say here is you're given.
Yeah.
You want to buy a gun? You have to go through what?
Background check.
Background checks and all that.
You have to get a permit, basically.
Yep.
And a permit is
Bingo.
I think, how do they define a permit? A permit is permission to do something that would be otherwise illegal to do.
Yep.
So why do you have to have a permit when the highest law of the land
Yep.
says you have the right to keep and bear arms?
And so there's this idea now that, you hear this, well, there's plenty of gun owners in the U.S. that believe in a background check, that think they're necessary. Well, and we were talking about this earlier, to check what?
Yeah.
What are we checking here?
Yeah.
If somebody, criminals can't have guns. Well, hold on. Criminals can't have guns. So what you're saying is that if somebody is that dangerous, they're allowed in society?
Mm-hmm.
If somebody's that dangerous that you got to have a record now on them because they can't buy a gun, well, what the hell are they doing in our society?
Yeah, why are they not locked up?
Right.
That always reminds me, kind of a different subject, but I always think about TSA and the no-fly list. And I hear about people that are on the no-fly list.
I had a friend who was on that list.
And you go to the
didn't
airport.
Even know how he got on it.
You don't know how you got on it, right? But here's the point, going back to what you were saying. If somebody is so dangerous that they need to be on a no-fly list,
oh, man,
then why in the hell do they get to leave the airport?
Yep.
If he can't fly, that means he done something. Shouldn't you arrest that dude and put him in prison right now?
Yep.
Shouldn't he be in a trial right now?
Yep.
What is a no-fly list?
Yep.
Well, it's the same thing about buying guns. What you looking at when you look me up to buy a gun? What are you looking at?
Yep.
I can't even
understand.
Listen,
I'm actually. The funny thing is, the more and more we talk about it, I kind of get more and more speechless because I really don't. There's only one. When you get down through it using logic, there's just one reason.
Yeah.
There's one reason.
No, there's only one reason. We're not done. We're in the middle of recording, actually. What? You need some help? She left. Now you can go sit down somewhere. Okay. Well, you gotta be quiet because we're recording. But what were we saying? There's only one reason.
Yep.
The older I get, the less inclined I am to make excuses for these people that want to take firearms. There is no excuse to take anybody's firearm. And I don't understand how you go and when somebody commits a crime, the first thing they want to do is go get the people who didn't do it to take their firearms. Like, I didn't do it. What are you looking at me for? Why don't you look at that dude?
Yep.
And you can't do pre-crime. Oh, you might commit a crime. So, well, a meteorite might destroy the planet.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I'm saying?
And I love talking to people about this because, just like you were saying, the older I get, the more questions I want to ask. Mm-hmm. When I was younger, it was just argue. Mm-hmm. Now I want to ask questions. And I've spoken to people that don't want anybody to have any guns, and you shouldn't be able to own a big black dangerous gun, or a small black dangerous. It's funny, it's all
black
around
is
the
dangerous,
color of the gun.
Yeah, it's black. That means military. If it's black, that's military.
But when I speak to them, what you find out is they're afraid. There is a fear, and in that fear. And what happens when we become afraid?
You want to lash out.
We want to try to start controlling things.
Yeah.
And what are they afraid of? It's kind of like, to me, it's just, why is a 7-year-old afraid when their closet door is open? Mm-hmm. It's all up here. Mm-hmm. Well, did you see? There's 35,000 gun deaths a year. Okay.
Well, first of all, stop counting suicides.
Let's get some logic on this. Mm-hmm. Well, that's the thing about fear. There is no logic in fear. Right. I mean, there's healthy fears, like, I'm not going to climb on the house and jump off.
Right.
But I don't know if that's really a fear, if that's just, actually, that's not even a fear. That's just knowledge. If I jump off the house, I'm going to probably break every bone in my body. Mm-hmm. But that fear is what institutes, well, we got to control them. And what they don't realize is, when I listen to how they talk, is what they don't realize is their biggest underlying fear which is interesting, is not having control, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, think about that. If you can't protect your own life, if you can't protect your own existence, if you can't have liberty, you have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So if control is your biggest fear, you can't even control your own life then.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so the other side is there are people that, you know what, they don't want to make any decisions. They want somebody else to make all the decisions for them,
Right.
so that they can. And people like that usually want to be able to point the finger.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I put you in charge, and look what you did.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, the underlying fear is, and they're not thinking it through. They're really not thinking it through. That you're willing to give up. You want control, but you're willing to give up the protection of your own life, the protection of your liberty.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I've started to notice as an adult. I really started thinking that through. That like, wow, these people are so afraid that they're willing to give up what they want the most, which is control. They're willing to give it up.
Well,
That's why fear is such an incredible thing.
Yeah.
You know?
And my take on that is what I notice about the people who want to control other people. It's not that they want to give up their personal control, but those type of people generally see themselves as ineffectual people, weak people, and they like to wield control through
Good point.
the levers of government. They like to exercise power through other people.
Yeah.
So that's why you always notice it's not that they don't want anybody to own firearms. They don't want you to own firearms, but they want cops and military to have firearms.
Absolutely. Yep.
Because they think they're going to be in control of the cops and military.
Yep.
So they're not. In other words, it's like a lack of courage, is what it is. They're scared to take control for themselves and take their destiny into their own hands.
Yep.
But they want to control you.
Yep.
But they want other people to control you.
Yep. Yep.
And I'm like, that is despicable, disgusting. How could you call yourself even a human being if you, first of all, don't even have the courage to want to defend yourselves and do things and take your destiny into your own hands, but second of all, you also want to strip that right from other people? What kind of person is that?
Yeah, I never looked at it from that point.
You know what I'm saying? I ain't never done that to you. Why would you take my weapons?
Yep.
And to me, what gets me the most is if they would leave me alone with my weapons, they would find that I'm the type of person that would defend them.
Well, and so what you just said there is interesting. In the end, what winds up happening? We wind up defending those people somehow or another.
And I'm not saying I'm Billy Badass.
No. I know that. It's just, but in the end, it winds up that when tyranny's at our front door, who's protecting who?
Yeah, because here it is. If I'm in public, if we're out there at the mall or whatever, and if you allow me to be armed the way I prefer to be, and I hate to even say if you allow me, you should be leaving me alone. I should have I have the natural right to go armed. As
Absolutely,
they used to say.
Absolutely.
So if you're not infringing on my natural right to go armed, and I'm in public and you're there and you don't want to be armed, that's fine. And some crazy fool or some evil demon jumps up and starts shooting at people. First of all, if I can, I'm gonna try to get me and my family out of there. Period. I don't really want to be involved with that. But if I can't successfully flee, I'm the kind of person that will make a stand. At least I think I will. As far as I've ever seen in my life, that seems to be the kind of person I am. So why would you want to disarm me?
Yep.
It goes back again to you just want to control me. You want to enslave me, essentially.
I want to use this other part to actually talk to gun owners about the well-regulated militia. Real quick, infringed. Act so as to limit or undermine, encroach on. So that's pretty simple, isn't it?
To act so as to undermine. Yeah.
That pretty much, to encroach upon in a way that violates law or the rights of another. So infringe means to make any movement, any act to limit. Any act. So
Not
that means
common sense.
That means you want to stop me by order of filling out paperwork. You want to try to create a system of I need to get a permit to buy ammo, which is something that they're talking about now in a lot of states. You want to create a permit for me to carry. Wait a minute. It says the right of the people to keep and bear. It doesn't say keep in your house locked up in a safe with a lock.
Right.
It doesn't say, keep in a crate.
Yeah.
It doesn't say keep in a bag.
Yeah. Definitely don't say keep them in a central armory.
Nope. It says to keep and bear, which that's pretty crystal clear there. Shall not be infringed. That means let's just messed with in any way, shape, or form. Now, something else I do want to talk about here is a well-regulated militia. And this just, and maybe I'm kind of off in left field here, but the reason I think about this is because you do training, I do training. We take gun ownership very seriously. Take it seriously in our families. I take it seriously with my children. And unfortunately, what I see a lot is an irresponsible gun owning community. Most people that own weapons are lucky if they fire it once a year. I can't tell you how many hunters I meet that, say things like, well, somebody comes into my house, I'm going to rack my shotgun, and that's going to run them off. Is it loaded? No. And this is what I'm getting at. There's kind of a big lesson right here from our forefathers. If you're going to own a gun, you yourself need to be well regulated. And that's a big thing, meaning it's not enough to just have a gun and have it in a safe next to your bed. You need to train. You need to know how to use it. You need to know how to take it apart. And you need to know how to take it apart with your eyes closed. You need to know how that weapon works. You need to know how you move, what you do with your family. And yes, that means practice at home. Practice if somebody comes in your house. We have fire drills for a reason. It means as a gun owner, you have a massive responsibility to know what to do with it, when to use deadly force. That is critical, and it is the gun community's responsibility across the board. Listen, if you're a hunter, here's what I know. If that's all you do is hunt, you don't have a clue how to protect yourself.
Right.
You really don't. You don't have a clue how to move and how to shoot. You don't have a clue how to make sure that if somebody attacks you in your home, that you don't put bullets through the wall and kill your children or your wife.
Yep. I think there's a disrespectful term for people like that. They call them FUDs, like Elmer Fudd. And it's kind of funny. I'm not calling anybody a FUD, but it's those people that, like you say, that shoot once a year, and then a lot of times those FUDs end up being actually anti-gun themselves. They're pro-gun for their shotgun or their 30-06 hunting rifle with a 3-round magazine or something like that, but they themselves aren't cool with people owning this is what they call them assault weapons, and we already discussed how that's a nonsense term.
Yep.
I call them sport utility rifles. You have a sport utility vehicle. A modern day rifle is a sport utility rifle. That's what it's for. It's for fun. It's for sport. It's for defense. It's for practice, for training, for hunting. You just use it for sport. George Washington, I think, said that of all the sports,
I love this.
Of all the sports out there, the best one that is the most fit for keeping the mind and body sound is that of practicing with the firearm. I think we talked about this last time. Well, we did a podcast previously and the audio got messed up about the philosophy of firearms. But on that, we were saying how George Washington must have known that football give you a concussion. You know what I'm saying? He's like, yo, don't mess around with football. That's gonna give you. Basketball is bad for your ankles. The best sport out there is firearms practice, ownership and shooting and firing a practice with your firearm.
Man, I want to look that up. I want to read that.
Yeah, he said, the daily walk with your firearm or something like that. I'm like, yeah. And I wish I had enough money to have enough land where I could just walk outside and shoot whenever I wanted to. That would be awesome. That's one of my fantasies. Oh yeah. Not drool on air. thinking about having 100 acres somewhere with a mountain behind it. That'd be awesome.
All right, so there is a. Okay, they want to know if I want to use cookies. All right, so. Oh, come on.
The man in the myth, George Washington. George Washington is another guy. While you're looking it up, we're talking about George Washington quotes. He said that government is like fire. Government is force. It is like fire. It is a dangerous servant and a fearful master. So you see that the first president of this country, that was his mind state about what government was. He said it was a dangerous servant and a fearful master. And that's why when you have that understanding of what the man's mind state was, then you understand why he says firearms ownership is the best sport.
Well, and remember, what's the first word in government?
What?
Govern.
Govern.
That means to what? Rule over.
Yeah.
So, quote from Washington, a free people ought not only be armed and disciplined, once again, well regulated,
disciplined,
but they should have sufficient arms and ammunition to maintain a status of independence from any who might attempt to abuse them, which would include their own government. Their own government.
Wow.
That's a big statement.
It's a trip too, because when you really do a little research into George Washington was almost like an action figure.
Dude, I would love to. Oh, gosh, I would love to meet him. Listen to this one. When government takes away citizens' right to bear arms, it becomes a citizen's duty to take away government's right to govern.
Yeah.
He said duty.
Yeah, you don't have a choice in it. It's your duty.
Duty.
Yeah. So I think we've kind of got our point across.
Yes, sir.
About the philosophy of firearms. To me, firearms has nothing to do with almost anything that people who are anti-gun and anti-gun, it has nothing to do with anything they ever bring up. It has nothing to do with hunting. It really doesn't have anything to do with crime. Although that's hunting and defending yourself against criminals is obviously a direct corollary to being able to own a firearm. But what it really has to do with is maintaining liberty.
100%. That's actually, real quick, you got to include the First Amendment, meaning when we can no longer get our government to adhere to the principles of which which have been laid out, and we use our free speech to do that, and it doesn't work anymore. This is why 2 comes after 1.
Yeah.
Because we're only left with one option.
Yeah.
What did Washington just say? It is our duty. And the last thing I do want to say to everybody is, if you own a gun, please get training, be responsible, know how to use it, love your country, love your liberty, and teach your children. Start at a young age. And get training, pay for training, not just point and shoot training. And any weapon you're going to own, learn it in and out. Just like your shoes. Everybody can tie their shoes with their eyes closed. You should be able to do that with your weapon also. And yeah, that means practice with your eyes closed. You should 100% be able to do that. Think about it. If a bad guy comes in your house at night, it's not lit up.
Yeah.
So that's our responsibility. I'll let you got the best wrap up. So
it is. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, this whole podcast, the point of it is to talk about freedom, liberty. I don't like to talk too much about politics, and I'd like to talk about the principles behind the politics, the principles of freedom. And so as we just kind of discussed, man, it's personal freedom. The only way you can possibly say that you are free is if you have the ability to defend yourself against people who would make you unfree. And obviously you understand that if you have the ability to defend yourself against people that would make you unfree, you are also prohibited from going out and making other people unfree. You know what I'm saying? So in other words, don't initiate force. It's all about self-defense and defense of one's liberty. And having said that, talked all about firearms and weapons and the philosophy of firearms ownership, I want to nonetheless remind you that we like to come and go in peace. And so with that, I'm going to bid you 2 digits.